It's 2026 and let's talk about what we're going to read in the new year. Hi, I'm Colleen. I talk about books and writing. Today I'm going to talk about my goals for 2026, which are going to be a little bit more loosey-goosey than they've been in last years. I find that I'm really good at my goals for about the first 4 months. So I solidly follow my goals January, February, March, and April. And then by May, everything kind of goes out the window. And I feel like that's okay. I don't really have to stay on top of these goals. But what I decided to do this year, instead of making like a particular number of books I wanted to read, or I want to get X amount off my TBR shelf, that I would make a bingo. Before I show you my bingo card, which is very plain because I don't like using a lot of ink on my printer, I did set some number goals. This year, I set a goal of reading 70 books through Goodreads. It's the program I use just because I feel like it is the most user-friendly. I ended up reading 74. I was gonna try and read 75, but then it was like December 30th and I didn't really wanna fly through any books, so I just decided 74 would be a fine number to end on. For 2026, I set my goal lower to 60 because I've talked about this before, how I've been getting like so intimidated by long books. And I think part of that is a numbers thing, that I feel like I have to read so many books. To the point that today I was driving and I was thinking whether or not I should even use Goodreads anymore, or whether or not I should even keep track of how many books I read. Because I don't want to be like, oh, I only read 3 books this month. Because I get those feelings, which is bizarre. But then I was like, I love data. So I don't think I could give it up. I did for years not track my reading. I worked at a bookstore a while ago when I was in my early 20s. And I had like a notebook in which I'd write down the books I read, but I never put a date next to when I read them. And I had that notebook for like 3 years, so I have no idea when I was reading any of those books. I don't know where that notebook is. That'd be fun to find. It's somewhere in this house. I didn't throw it away. I want to read 60 books this year, and I want to stay around 60. I don't want to like be like, oh, look at me, I read 100 books, even though I only said I was going to read 60. I want to stay around 60. Because if I read 100 books, that means I'm going to have read a ton of 70-page romance novellas. There's nothing wrong with that, but I want to focus on getting some of the longer books that I've been intimidated read. Now, let's just start with the bingo, now that I waxed poetically about that for a little while. As I said, my bingo is very plain, black ink only. I made like a fun one in Canva with like a gold background. I'm like, I'm not going to print this. It's going to eat up all my ink, and my children do enough of that already. You know how bingo works. 5 by 5, you have to get either 5 down, 5 across, or 5 diagonally. I want to get at least 1 bingo. I'd like to get, I forget what you call it, because I don't really play bingo, but whatever it's called when you get all the bingo squares, I'd love that. I don't think it's going to happen. Not that I made it too hard, but I feel like there's some stuff on here that's just going to be hard to do all of it. So the first one, the top left-hand corner, is that I want to read a book that I bought before 2022. I don't have that many on my TBR shelf. I probably have 5 books that were purchased before 2022, but I want to read at least one of them. I also feel like I need to get to a point where I should let go of some of these if I'm not going to read them. Next, I want to reread a Juliette Marillier book, and I'm on the fence about which one I want to reread. I think I'm either going to reread Wolfskin, which is the first book in the Light Isle series, which takes place in Norway and Scotland. Or I'm going to reread The Son of the Shadows, which is the second book in the Seven Water series. I've read that book 3 times. When people say, what's your favorite book? I usually say that, but I haven't reread it since like 2006. So I do kind of feel weird saying that's my favorite book because it's been such a long time since I reread it. So I'm going to reread one of those. I haven't decided yet. Or maybe I'll go crazy. I also kind of want to reread Heart's Blood, which is her standalone. I don't know. I haven't decided, but one of them will happen in 2026. I would like to do a month of library reads only, in which I pick a month. I go to the library, whatever, like 3 days before the month starts, and I pick out 5 to 7 books from the library, and that's what I'm going to read that month. I think that would be really fun to do one month. Honestly, I'm guessing I'm going to probably do that maybe in April, because I get a lot of books in December and then I don't buy any more books till May usually. So by April, I'm kind of like, I still have a lot of books, but that's when I kind of get like, I'm sick of my books. I want different books. And so that would be a fun time to do it. Next I want to read a high fantasy, mainly because I used to only read high fantasy. This is like 15 years ago. And lately I've been finding that I've been having a harder time connecting with high fantasy. And so like I read The Witch and the Czar, and I remember thinking that if I had read this like 15 years ago, I think I would have loved this book, but it just like wasn't gelling with me like I thought it would. So I want to give another high fantasy a try and see if maybe I'm just not into high fantasy anymore, which is totally possible. I mean, 15 years ago, I didn't read thrillers ever. So your tastes change, but I just want to give it like one more shot and see what I think. And I've got a lot of high fantasy on my TBR. And then last, for the top row, right-hand corner, I have an old school romance from before 1990. I have 2 on my shelf right now, which I'm not going to remember the titles of, but I'll show you pictures of right here. And I'd like to read at least one of them this year. So let's go down now to the second row, left side. I have a fat book from my TBR shelf. There's a lot of fat books on my TBR shelf. There's The Wheel of Time. There's The Secret History. There's In the Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. There's, what else? Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, which I just got last summer, but is now becoming one of these books I'm like afraid to start reading. Though I told myself maybe I'd read 50 pages tonight before I went to bed. But I've just got a lot of these fat books that I'm intimidated to. So I need to read one of them and check it off the list. Next, I have a classic. And I'm just looking at, this is kind of a weird thing I did with this row. I think on my TBR shelf right now, the only classic I have is I Capture the Castle, which I started and really liked, but it was very like springy, I feel like, when I was reading it, and then I kind of put it down, and by the time I picked it back up, it was like July, and I wasn't really in the mood for it anymore. So maybe this is the year I actually finish that book, or I pick a different classic, maybe in my month of library reads only. And then next to that, I shouldn't have put these next to each other, I have a Shakespeare play. If you've been following me for a long time, which I don't know how many of you are here from when my channel first started a long time ago, I have a lifelong goal to read all of Shakespeare's plays. And I've been doing a bad job lately keeping up with that. I'm actually gonna grab my complete Shakespeare because I forgot to grab it before I started filming. I'll be right back. So I have this great collection of Shakespeare that my favorite teacher from high school gave me as a graduation present. And then I actually like utilized this all through college, which is insane. I carried this around for like all my Shakespeare. I did take a whole Shakespeare class, but like in classes where we'd read 1 or 2 Shakespeare, I'd like bring this to class. I'm sure the kids in my class thought I was a pretentious a-hole, but I keep track in here of what I've read and what I haven't read. I have check marks next to everything I've read. A few years ago, maybe in 2022, I read Julius Caesar and A Winter's Tale, and I really enjoyed A Winter's Tale, and I liked Julius Caesar. And I think that year I had put 5 plays on my TBR, and the other 3 were comedies. And I think I started As You Like It, and then never finished it. So obviously I need to go back and read a couple, but I have quite a few that I haven't read. There's a lot that I haven't read. I've probably read less than 50%, mainly because I don't really like the histories. So the only histories I've ever read have been assignments, but I'm just looking to see. Oh, actually, I might like to read Richard III. So at some point during the year, I'd like to read a Shakespeare play. It could be Richard III. It could be As You Like It. After Shakespeare, I have that I want to read a translated book, which isn't that difficult because I do tend to read maybe 1 or 2 translated books a year. Not always, but I have one that I got for Christmas that I'm kind of eyeing to take this spot. And then for the last square on that row, I've got an author from an African country. I was just looking through my Goodreads, and I pretty much only read books written by American, British, and Canadian authors. and I just wanted to a little bit diversify where I'm getting my authors from. And I don't remember the last time I read a book from an author who was from an African country, like born in an African country. And so I thought that'd be a good one to put on the list. And then same thing, next row, first one is an author from an Asian country. I am toying with the idea of not letting myself pick Japan, because I do read a couple books that are translated from Japanese every year. Not like a ton, but like a couple. And so I was like, I don't know if I should make it not Japan. But then I was like, should I make it harder for myself? I don't know, we'll see. So I'm just keeping that in mind, that maybe I pick a country that's not Japan for that. Next square is nonfiction, and I left that one really broad, and you'll see I've got some other things in here that are also nonfiction, but that's just like a broad nonfiction. We're on the third row, so the next one's the free space. After that, I want to read a book about books. And I would let that be either about writing books or about reading books or something about books, something about working in the library, working in a bookstore, something like that. And then last for that row, I have a sci-fi. I read a sci-fi once every couple of years, and it's been a while since I read one. I'm kind of reading one right now, but it's more like speculative than sci-fi. So I'm just like, I'm just gonna put that on there and see if I find a sci-fi that I want to pick up. And it doesn't have to be like space opera-y. It can just be a science fiction book. Down one more row. The first one I put is a horror novel. I read a horror novel last October, I think it was, or September. It was around then. And I actually was surprised that I didn't find it scary. It was kind of like gross, and I can handle gross. So I was like, maybe I can handle reading horror. It might just have to be the right horror. And let's put it on the list again for this year. Let's keep diversifying my reading taste. Sci-fi and horror are both two things that I read very rarely, and so put them on the bingo this year. My next in that row is a popular romance novel. So I read a lot of romance, but I tend not to read the romance novels everyone's gushing about. I just find myself not enjoying them as much as other romance. But I read Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan this past summer, and I really liked it a lot. And I usually wouldn't pick that up because it's like got the illustrated cover and it's super popular, and bookstores that don't carry romance have it. And so I wouldn't usually read that. I really just think that not being judgmental of popular romance would be good for me, because I did end up finding an author I really liked. I do also have one of Annabelle Monaghan's books on my TBR right now that I bought at my used bookstore. It's like the one Nora Goes Somewhere. And so I have that locked and loaded. Though I think I'd probably rather pick one that's like just come out this year that's popular rather than pick one from a few years ago, but we'll see. And then next I have an author from a South American country, just sticking with my wanting to go beyond the United States, Britain, and Canada. And then next I have a non-romance novella, which I honestly always read Nevo's novellas in the Singing Hills series. And I know she has at least one, maybe even two that I haven't read yet. So that's probably what that's gonna be. And it's probably gonna be in my month of library reads only. And then the last one from this line is kind of hilarious. I want to implement one interior design idea from a design book. I really like to check out interior design books from the library. I have a lot of fun doing it, and I take tons of notes and get tons of ideas, and then I never follow through on anything. And so I really want to follow through on one thing this year. Now for my last row, far left, I have reread all of the books I've written as Colleen Delaney, which sounds insane, but I'm finishing up 2 series, and I feel like before I actually finish them, I want to read the whole series just for continuity. So that's actually something I'll do pretty early. I would like to read the first, it's funny because like the 4th book in The Witches of Star Island isn't out yet, but like it's done. So I'd like to reread the first 4 books in The Witches of Star Island before I turn in my like manuscript for the 5th one, which is gonna come up in like March or April. So I'll do that soon. I read my own books way faster than regular books because they're like in your brain already, so you skim a lot more. But then after that, maybe on the second half of the year, I'd like to reread all the Wolves of Luven books. just to sort of get some momentum back into that series for finishing up the last couple books in that series. And then next, I want to read a top 10 seller at my local store the week of my birthday. So my local bookstore every week puts up their 10 best-selling books of the week, like behind the counter with a stack of them. And for my birthday week, I always go to a bunch of bookstores and buy the books I'm going to read in the summer. My birthday's in May. And I want to pick a book from that top 10 list the week of my birthday, which obviously it's not something I can get done until May, but a pretty easy thing to do, unless I guess either I will have already read most of them, which I don't think will happen, or I'll be disappointed on the selection, but I think I can get that one done. The next one I want to try a new Juliet Cross series. I really love the Stay a Spell series by Juliet Cross, and I really loved A Rebel Without Claws, which is the first book in the spin-off series, but she doesn't have a planned release date as far as I know at this time for the second book, and I really like her writing and sort of miss being in her world. So I want to try a new series. I know it won't be in the same world as these two, because these two series are in the same world, but I think it would just be fun to get into a new series with her. And then I want to read an armchair travel book, which is like, I don't know if that's even what it's called anymore, but when I worked at the bookstore, it was called that. So it's like those books that are like, I lived here for a year and this is what it was like, or I like Wild. I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. I want to read a book like that. I haven't read one in a long time, and I think I'd rather read a newer one than like a classic. Like I know, I'm just like looking at my husband's shelf. I know he has Into Thin Air and Into the Wild, but I don't really want to read either of those. I'd rather, and actually I don't think Into the Wild is armchair travel. That's like a biography of someone who died. But I'd rather read a book that's come out more recently about some cool travel thing someone wanted to do. I spent like 3 years in my 20s trying to be a travel writer, and I did get my first ever thing published was a piece of nonfiction about traveling, but it just didn't happen for me. And I think I'm kind of lucky that I was too young for the Instagram travel influencer thing, because I probably would have tried to do that and bankrupted myself and failed miserably, but that's okay. And then my last box is I want to read a historical fiction that is set outside of the United States and Europe. I like historical fiction a lot. I mostly read historical fiction set in Europe. I occasionally read it set in the United States. I want to read something not set either of those places. I didn't exclude Canada because I don't think I've really read historical fiction that takes place in Canada. So that'd be kind of cool if I found one, especially if it was like Nova Scotia, because I really like that area of Canada. But I think that in particular will really help me with my book of the month choices. If there's a really cool book that takes place in, I don't know where, I was going to say feudal Japan, but I told myself I already do read a lot of stuff that takes place in and around Japan. But if there's a really cool story that takes place in like ancient China, that would be really fun. And so I just want to sort of broaden my horizon. So that's kind of the whole point of my 2026 reading bingo, is to broaden my horizons. I want to read, some of this is like stuff I really want to get done. Like I want to get some of those older books read. I want to get some of those thick books read. I need to work on my Shakespeare goal, etc. But other things are really about like expanding what I read. Read a sci-fi, read a horror, read a book by a South American author, like cool stuff like that. So I am looking forward to this. I'll probably check in with this very periodically, because this is something that's a little bit more personal. I'll definitely let you know a year from now how much I've completed, or maybe if I complete it before then. But this isn't going to be something I'm going to check in on every month, because it's not going to be something I finish fast. I purposefully made sure that none of the rows are that easy. So yeah, I guess, no, that's kind of hard. The one that's not terrible is a book you bought before 2022, which is a free space, a classic and then the free space, a non-romance novella, and then historical fiction set outside the United States or Europe. So that's not terribly hard. But some of these are hard, especially the one where I have to implement an interior design idea from the book. That's like tough for me mentally. Okay, so that's my whole reading bingo. If you're doing a reading bingo, please tell me what some of your cool categories are. And if you've done one in the past, I'd love to hear about it too. If you made it this far and you don't want to write words, I don't think there's a bingo emoji. Maybe give me like a poker chip emoji. There might be one of those. I'm not sure. But as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.